Hi, I'm Stacey. My colleagues and I are going to be doing a variety of critical reasoning and reading comp problems to show you how this whiteboard works. The problems are all from the official starter kit over at MBA.com, and it's from the free problem set that comes with that kit. You need two things to play along at home. You need to go pull up our online whiteboard and then grab yourself a timer. Ready? Let's go.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and I'll be using a mouse. All right, so I want you to put 2 minutes on your timer and get your whiteboard ready. Before the timer goes off, I want you to have an answer for this problem. All right, so go ahead and pause the video right now. Give yourself the 2 minutes to work through this problem, and then unpause the video to see how I might think through it. All right, let's get to it. Which of the following most seriously weakens the argument? I'm going to have to bust a hole in the logic here. A museum's been offered a statue. Statue might be genuine for various reasons. But ancient surface usually is uneven weathering, and this surface is uniform, okay? And uniformity kind of signifies it could be fake, therefore it's a fake. All right, so here's what I've got. The therefore is key. This conclusion here is the statue is fake. And the reason they're using to draw this conclusion is, genuine statues are uneven. This one isn't. This one is smooth, uniform. And that kind of tips me off that it might be from like a chemical bath of a forger or something like that. So I'm kind of think of like, again, there has to be an issue here because it's a weaken the argument question. I have to be able to weaken it with the right answer. So the problem might be that like there are some, like they're usually uneven, but there are some genuine ones that aren't uneven. And maybe I could find like example that this is one of those. Museums can accept the recently honored statue. Okay, this is not about the surface. I need something about the surface since that's what our premise is about to derive our conclusion. A is not about the surface. B is not about the surface. It's about the pose. C is about the surface. That one looks pretty good. It suggests that like these dealers actually use the chemical baths themselves, and so maybe it's legit. It's okay that the forgers haven't done this because this particular statue isn't patchy. It's smooth. It's not uneven. It's smooth. So D is about the surface, but not in a related way. And then E. E's kind of tricky, but E actually is about the surface in the wrong way, right? There's another one just like it. That was a forgery. That strengthens the conclusion. It doesn't weaken. This one's got to be answer C. So the process here is the same, whether it's on the whiteboard or on paper, okay? I still want to identify in a weaken the argument question or a strengthen the argument question or a find the assumption or an evaluate the argument question, like what is the conclusion and what is the support? The conclusion here is the statue is fake and it's based on kind of observations of the smoothness of the surface, okay? Potentially, there are some examples that are smooth, that aren't fake. And so we need to kind of come up with a reason for like why this statue might be one of those, okay? And C is the only thing that kind of gives us reason to believe that a smooth statue could be real, and therefore this smooth statue that the museum has been offered might be real or genuine. I still like to write out my conclusion on the right side of my page. I like to write out my support on the left side, and this goes for paper or on the whiteboard. That way I can better kind of think about this, I make a physical gap, but also a logical gap in the argument. And I always want to make sure I'm keeping track of my answers, remembering that on verbal, 4 wrongs equal 1 right. Yes, you may have heard that 2 wrongs do not equal a right. 4 wrongs equal a right on verbal. Cool.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'll be using a mouse. I'm going to take a look at this passage for the first time. I'm just going to jot down A, B, C, D, and E so that when I do get around to looking at the question and the answer choices, I can make some eliminations using this little grid here. So I'm going to start reading the modern multinational corporation is described as having, describing the origins of the multinational corporation. Okay, so it's talking about the multinational corporation and how it originated, and there are a few things that led to this. One was increased volume of transactions necessitated this change. And then also these 19th century inventions like the steamship and the telegraph, those are key factors. So those are a couple of things that led to this shift. We got 16th and 17th chartered trading companies. Despite, they're usually considered irrelevant. Because they don't have many transactions and they're kind of primitive. Okay, great. So first paragraph, purpose is kind of setting up the origins of this multinational corporation, where it came from. Then we got paragraph 2. In reality, however, we're pivoting here. Early trading companies successfully purchased. Interesting. So we said they were irrelevant in the previous paragraph, but apparently they're not, because they're back in paragraph 2. So the trading companies did a bunch of stuff, and the large volume of transactions, so maybe they have a lot of transactions, contrary to what the first paragraph said, and that may have necessitated this hierarchical management structure. So actually, maybe they're more relevant than we thought. For example, we got some example. I don't really care about the details. Just those are all details. Okay, so maybe the trading companies are more important than we thought. Okay, so now paragraph 3, the trading companies did. They differed. So they differed strikingly from modern multinationals. Relied on national governments. So a lot of details of how they differed. Despite these differences, however, they merit further study as analogs of more. So maybe they're still relevant. All right, fine. So let's look at the question. It can be inferred. So inferences, we're looking for something that's very much supported by the passage, maybe not in the passage word for word. Would characterize activities as being, these activities. I remember they talked about the activities right here in this first sentence. The trading company's activities were in that first sentence of the second paragraph. So maybe that's where the answer will be. Let's see. A is complex enough in scope to require a substantial amount of planning and coordination on the part of. That actually sounds very much like what the second paragraph was saying. Got all these activities, the large volume, necessitated hierarchical management structures, required a substantial amount of planning and coordination on the part of management. That A looks very, very good. I'm gonna scan through the other answer choices, but A looks quite good. B, too simple to be considered similar. No, not really. I mean, they said at the very end they should be studied as analogs of modern structures. I mean, a lot of the second paragraph is about how they were similar. So we'll knock out B. As intricate as those carried out by, no, probably not. I mean, they're similar, but not exactly as maybe intricate. Knock out C. Often unprofitable. No, nothing about profit in this passage. I would have remembered that. Hampered by political demands. The last paragraph did have something about governments of home countries right here, but nothing about political demands or being hampered by them. Now we're going to knock out that too. I'm going to go with answer choice A. And we'll take a look. And it is A. Okay, so here's my thinking on this is, as I read these passages, the goal of my passage map isn't to write down all the details. The details will be there. Just like when I'm doing this with paper and pencil, I'm not going to write down all the details, especially though when I'm using this online whiteboard. So I'm just more or less using my passage map over here to kind of highlight some of the key themes that are coming up, some of the key transitions, like when you've got this word however that puts the second paragraph in pretty stark opposition to some of the stuff in the first paragraph. I thought that was kind of important. And then actually we kind of swung back in the third paragraph talking about how these trading companies were different. So I think just kind of following the main themes and then being flexible enough to then dive back into the passage when they ask about some detail that I might not have quite memorized from that first read. So, I'm not, in this case, really letting the online whiteboard change too much of what I would have done normally with paper and pencil. If anything, my writing's atrocious, so being able to type this out might be a net benefit to me.
All right, not looking. I just want to point out I would have already set this up on my scratch paper before I got to a specific problem. Okay. Passage, take some notes. MMC, I hate the business ones. MMC is 19th century. When they went from owner to worker in a hierarchy. Okay, fine. Because lots of transactions. And specifically 19th century. Okay, and 16th. Okay, not 16th and 17th century. I'm going to go back up here, and I love, by the way, that I can do this in 19th century. Seemed to have been too low, and okay, whatever. Oh, wait. In reality, however, okay. They're going to go again. Okay, so not, okay, not usually. I missed the little foreshadowing there. Okay. In reality, however, but 1617 basically did do, wow, a lot. E.g. Hudson's Bay. Lots of details, okay. The early trading companies. Oh, but there were some differences, even though that wasn't a difference. 1617, national interest, owners, and a bunch of stuff. Okay, so basically, modern multinationals, people mostly think that they don't have anything to do with these other older 16th and 17th century companies, but actually there is a way in which they're similar. They did have a huge volume of transactions and things going on. There were just other differences between the two. So that's the progression. Let's go look at the question. In order to, this is a why question. Why did the author list the various activities of early charter trading companies? I think that's the old ones. Yeah. Charter trading companies are the 16th century. Okay. So why did they list the various activities of the old companies, 16 and 17? No, it was to show that, in fact, they did have something in common with the 19th century ones. No, that's a trap. That's it. Going against that claim. No, it's not about it being international. No, it's not supporting the argument at all. It's going against it. Okay, so the answer is C. Before we get into actual content here, some tool things that are minorly annoying. There's actually some things I like about the tools for being able to do RC, but there's one thing that's annoying. Every time you go click back on the text tool, it defaults back to 18-point font. You can see that my thing is bigger here. I didn't go change it when I made this new text box. It's fine if you're just doing a single word, but when I was doing all of this, if I'd used 18-point font, I would have risked running off screen. So just note that you may have to go change that depending on how far zoomed in or zoomed out you are. The thing I like, though, is that I usually do actually a very word-based map for my passages, and I can't write as quickly as I can type, and I'm messier, so usually I'll have pretty heavy abbreviations where I can actually type out more full words when I'm just typing. So I like that a lot. And I just use paragraph. Normally, if I'm writing, I would do like P1, P2, P3, but I can just use paragraph entries here to separate out. And then the thing that I love here is like I missed something about the significance of what this last bit of the first paragraph was saying when I first read it. It wasn't until I saw this in reality, however, that I realized that I had missed kind of where they were going with this. And then since it's not written, I could like actually go back and edit it. And so it's just easier than having to do like a little like wait star and say that I wanted to say something else. One other tech note on this: when you click out of a text box that you've made in this program, it like locks it forever and then you can't go back in and change it. So when you're doing your notes for a passage, don't do a separate text box for each paragraph. Do one big text box for the whole thing and don't click out of it until you're done with your notes for the passage. Okay, and then in order to means that this is a why question. The way that I got rid of each of the 4 wrong answers, they list out all these activities for the older companies because they're specifically, like it's this in reality, however, they're specifically making this contrast and saying it's not the case that they should be considered irrelevant. They should be considered very relevant to this discussion. So they're specifically calling out that they're like, these older companies are like the modern multinationals in this way. This one takes it into like changes in management structure. That's not what's going on. It's really a comparison with these other later companies that were the modern multinationals. This one I think is an excellent trap. If I had misread this or just been going too quickly and thought that this was referring to the 19th century companies, because they listed a bunch of transactions or like whatever details of those companies, then I would have thought that they were talking about, oh, lots of volume of whatever transactions compared to those earlier 16th and 17th century firms. But that's not what's going on here. This is referring specifically to the 16th and 17th century firms, and I can see that from their exact language match right here, chartered trading companies. This one's the correct answer. It's what I had thought of before I looked at the answer choices. And then this one, it's not about emphasizing international scope. It's really about refuting something that had been said in the prior paragraph. And ditto, it's not about supporting that prior argument. It's actually going against it. So that's it. C is the only answer that makes sense. Okay, so you've seen us each do our own problem. Now you get to watch us do the same problem. You'll get to see the similarities and differences in terms of how we thought to solve this thing and how we use the whiteboard. What else? Oh, you should try the problem. You try the problem first and then watch us.
All right, we've got double bold face here. I'm going to go find the conclusion and see how they relate. All right, the first one's not a conclusion. I don't think the second one is either because it says it's true. All right, big pivot here, however. All right, here's our prediction. Something would almost certainly increase. We need support for that prediction, and the support is that lawyers would no longer have incentive to lower their fees, and if no longer required to specify fee ranges, many lawyers would now who now advertise would increase their fees. All right, so the second supports our prediction, which is in this however statement. So neither of our bold faces are the conclusion. We know that the second supports the conclusion or prediction. And the first is actually opposed to the conclusion or prediction because we have this big however word here. So I need some answer choice. It gets to both of those and their relationship, that the relationship between 1 and 2 are in opposition. The first is generalization, accepts as true. Okay, the second is presented as a consequence that follows from that. Okay, the second does not follow from the first. They are not in agreement. They are on opposite sides here. The first is a pattern that the consumer advocate argues will be repeated. No, it's opposed to what the consumer advocate thinks what's going to happen. It's opposed to prediction, so B's out. All right, that looks pretty good. Will not hold, opposed. Second offers consideration support. Second supports the prediction. That one looks pretty darn good. Let's keep going, double check. First is evidence that the consumer advocate offers in support. No, the first is not in support. The first is opposed. Let's see what E does. First acknowledges a consideration that weighs against. Weighs against the main position is opposed. That looks pretty good. The second is that position. The second isn't the position. The second supports that position. The second is not the conclusion. The second is a premise for the conclusion. So that must mean it's answer C. All right, so the process here is to find the conclusion. All right, yes, I know there's boldface. Remember, the boldface lines may not contain the conclusion. All right, they might relate the conclusion in some way. They're not necessarily containing the conclusion themselves. So what we find is the conclusion or the prediction is that eliminating the state requirement would actually increase fees for consumers. And here's the support. Lawyers who now advertise would increase their fees. So this kind of supports why this prediction would come about, which is in opposition to this, like what's happened in the past. Each time restrictions have been eliminated, the number of lawyers advertising has increased and actually legal costs have gone down. So these are in opposition. It's key to kind of write that down. And now we are looking for answer choices that reflect that. I'm also looking for answer choices that reflect that the two bold faces are in disagreement too. They're in conflict. One's opposed to the prediction, one's on the same side. Don't need to write much more out than that. And I probably wouldn't do this on paper or on a yellow pad. I definitely would want to keep track of my answers though. I don't want to kind of have to say like, did I eliminate A? I don't know. I'll just go double check because those extra 10 seconds add up across 36 verbal questions. Once you eliminate an answer, get rid of it and know that you've gotten rid of it. Cool.
I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this, set up my answer choices to help with eliminations over here on the whiteboard. Draw my lines to keep me organized. And then we'll take a look at the question. It's asking about describe the role of the boldface sections. Okay, great. Reading the passage, consumer advocate. This thing is generally true. This is also true. The first bold is something the advocate's saying is true. However, we're pivoting here, eliminating the requirement will almost certainly increase consumer costs. That previous sentence said it was going to decrease it, so that's a conflict there. And then we give some reasons why we're going to increase costs. So the conclusion, I'm going to pick up the conclusion first, and the conclusion is that sentence that starts with, however, the advocate thinks that eliminating these requirements will increase costs. And then I think about what that means for the first bold. That's a counterpoint in that case, because that says it's going to decrease costs to the consumer. Whereas for the second bold, that's a reason why the conclusion would hold. It's a reason why costs would go up. So that's a premise. Let's look at the answer choices. Answer choice A says the first is a generalization. The consumer advocate accepts as true. They do say it's true, but I don't think it's a generalization they accept as true because the conclusion says the opposite. It's a counter. So I'm going to knock off A. B says, argues it'll be repeated in this case. Nope. The conclusion says the opposite. Predicts will not hold in this case. So C looks pretty good. So C is solid. D says offers in support. The first bold is a counterpoint, so it's not supporting the conclusion. E gets it right though. E says it goes against the main position. So that looks pretty good. Then going back to C with the second bold, a consideration in support of the prediction. It's a premise, so that looks good. And E, the second, is that position. No, the position is the conclusion that starts with the word however. So I'm going to knock off answer choice E and go with answer choice C. And let's see. Yeah, that's the right answer. So, on these, I'm really just trying to almost kind of minimize how much I write. I don't write a whole lot for critical reasoning, even when I'm using kind of paper and pencil. And so for me, with these kind of describe the role type questions, I really just want to make sure I'm solid on the conclusion. So whether I write that down or whether I just like keep it seared in my mind that that sentence in the middle there that starts with however is the main conclusion. I think that's super important. But then also thinking about how those boldface sections relate to that conclusion. And for me to just jot down whether they are kind of pro the conclusion or they go against the conclusion, that's a helpful thing to just have straight in my head, so that when I do make the eliminations amongst the answer choices, I've got a place to start at least.
All right, before we start, I have already set up my scrap paper the way I normally would before I start the section. Boldface. It is generally true. Okay. Complicated. Okay. Saying that all of these things are true, however. Okay. This one is a fact, though, this second one. It is true, however. Must specify fees, get rid of that. Consumer costs go up. Okay. And then claim they increase fees. If they could, basically, if they could keep them out of their ads. Okay. So the first boldface is a fact, and it's something that like this person's acknowledging to be true, but doesn't hold in the given case, or given this new claim that this person's making. Got it. First, yeah. No, opposite. This goes against. No, will not be repeated. Predicts will not hold, yeah. Sorry, okay, so the first is something that the advocate predicts will not hold, that's true. Because they predict this other thing will happen, and yep, okay, got it. No. Oh, I hate this language. The first acknowledges something that weighs against, yes, the main position. Oh wait, maybe this is it. Is it Siri? Oh, sorry. I was thinking that this said the second is that prediction, but it's the second offers a consideration and support of the prediction, but this is the prediction. They would now increase their fees. Oh, no, wait. No, this is the prediction that it would reduce legal costs because they would raise their fees. Okay, now I like C again. Let's go back and look at E again. The first acknowledges a consideration that weighs against the main position. Oh, yeah. Okay, got it. That's the distinction between C and E, and this is why I was getting caught up. This isn't the final position. The final position is that the consumer costs would go up. If the lawyers charge more, then consumers' costs go up. So this is not the final position. That one's out. C is the correct answer. Got it. Okay. I hate these. Boldface questions are so annoying. And the reason for me that they're so annoying is this language that's so so annoying. Down here in the answer choices, it's really important to get super clear up here. And actually the reason that I struggled right at the end there was that there was one thing I didn't do that you really need to do on these, which is to make sure that you know what the final conclusion is. I was so focused on the two bold faces, and I did successfully, identify them and like what they were doing. But I didn't make sure that I got clear in my head that the chain of events here is they're not required to specify a fee, therefore they raise their fees, therefore it increases consumers' legal costs. This is really the final thing in the chain of events, and so that's the final conclusion. That's how you choose between C and E on this problem. For the first part of it, or let's actually just run through the answer choices. So this is how I got rid of each one. It is true for this first half. The first is something that the consumer advocate accepts as generally true, but the second part is not something that follows from that first part. It's the opposite. This person is saying that, the advocate is saying that it's not actually going to apply in this case, even though usually it's true. The second answer choice here, it needs this little word not right here. They're actually saying that this will not be repeated in this specific case that we're talking about, that's the problem. So I didn't even read the second half because I'd already eliminated it from this first half. Let's skip C for now and go to D. The consumer advocate does acknowledge that the first thing is usually true, but it doesn't use that to support the prediction made later if the advocate thinks this is not what's going to happen. So D is definitely out as well. I got mostly distracted by the first part of answer C and E because they're so, that just the language is so annoying. And so I was so focused on that I didn't notice that the real distinction I needed to make here was between the two second parts of the answer choices. Both of these are correct for the first part. It's something that is usually true. This first part is something that's usually true, but is just not going to be true for this particular case that the advocate is talking about. And that's what both of the first halves of these two answer choices say. The distinction here is really, is that second piece a premise in support of the final conclusion or prediction, or is that second piece the actual conclusion? And this is E is a great trap because we're also used to people making arguments like in order basically and putting their conclusion at the end is the last thing that they say, and this is the last thing that they say. Plus it does have an if then setup. If this one thing happens, then this other thing will happen. So it sounds like, okay, this is it. This is the final step in the plan. But it's actually not. The last thing that happens in the logical sequence of events in the plan is that if the lawyers increase their fees, then the consumers are going to have to pay more. That's the final step. And so that gets called out as the final conclusion. I should have taken an extra like 10 seconds once I got this all straight in my head to make sure that I went back and said, okay, so this is a claim, but it's not the final claim. The final claim is that this then loops back around to consumer costs go up. And so this right here is my final conclusion, even though it's true that this second boldface is a claim. They almost got me, almost. That's it.